Ladies and gentlemen of the Andover community, good morning. Thank you. It's a beautiful day outside. I appreciate the good energy you're all bringing in. I encourage you to settle down. We have a very special all-school meeting. Thank you. My name is Mrs. Savino, and I have the great privilege of being the director of the alumni engagement here at Andover. Dr. Siegfried, thank you very much for your warm welcome for us as we came into the chapel this morning. As I mentioned, we have a very special all-school meeting program today. In advance of kicking off that program, I welcome Georgia Ezell and Claire Brady to the podium.
Hi everyone, my name is Georgia and I'm a senior from Andover.
Hi, I'm Claire and I'm an upper from Portland, Maine. As Andover-Exeter weekend approaches, there is one more way we can one-up Exeter. This Thursday, November 8th, EcoAction is hosting the first ever AE food waste competition. We will be counting the total number of clean plates dropped off at the conveyor belts and commons during lunch and dinner, and Exeter will be doing the same. At the end of the day, each of our schools will calculate the ratio of clean plates to total plates counted to see which school produces less food waste.
According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, 1/3 of the world's food is wasted every year, and reversing this trend would preserve enough food to feed 2 billion people, more than twice the number of undernourished people around the world. In the United States alone, 60 million metric tons of food are wasted every year, and 32 million metric tons end up in landfills. Not only does this wasted food represent wasted land, water, and fossil fuels, but food waste in landfills releases methane into the atmosphere, a greenhouse gas that is 21 times more powerful than carbon dioxide.
So make sure to eat all of your red meat this Thursday and every day to practice more sustainable habits and show Exeter who's best.
Thank you.
As I shared, I'm the director of the alumni engagement here at Andover. One of the great joys of my job is to work with alumni on brilliant ideas that they bring forward. One of these ideas was the creation of the Alumni Award of Distinction, now in its 7th year. This award recognizes alumni for excellence in their field, an award for alumni given by alumni. To tell us more about the award is one of our dedicated volunteers who worked with us to create it, Chris Geist, class of 1976.
Thank you, Jenny. Greetings to you all. I'm Chris Geist. I'm the class of 1976. For you students in your day-to-day life, it can be easy to overlook that you are being prepared actually for what comes after Andover and after college or whatever else follows Andover. That preparation is fundamentally how you may be a meaningful member of society. It is similarly easy to overlook that you will be alumni of Andover, a pretty worthy identification all by itself. As alumni, you always will be able to reflect on what your Andover experiences mean or were to wherever you are at any point in your lives. I like to say nary a day goes by where I don't think of the good fortune I had from attending Andover. Today is the annual Fines Origine Pendet all-school meeting. That special identity started in 2011. It is intended to feature distinguished Andover alumni who return to campus to share insights, perspectives, and lessons learned from and about Andover and beyond. Neither Andover nor Abbott, through all of its wonderful years, would claim credit for all of an alumna's accomplishments. However, if indeed the end truly depends upon the beginning, then it seems not an exaggeration to believe that this great school in all its historical settings did in fact play a role in shaping the lives of the remarkable alumni who appear today in this all-school meeting. In fact, I went to law school and we were told that you look to the left, look to the right, and you may not see that person for the end of the first year or the first semester. I think if you guys look around to each other, you don't know. One of you will be up here in a few years. So there you go. Think about that. Today's meeting is a different version of the Fine Origine Pendant All-School meeting in that it is a setting for presenting the 2018 Andover Alumni Award of Distinction. The Award of Distinction was inaugurated in 2012. Its purpose is to recognize and honor alumni of Phillips Academy and Abbott Academy who have served with distinction and exhibited leadership in the arts, sciences, letters, humanities, or other significant fields of endeavor. The award also strives to connect current students, faculty, and staff with these inspirational role models through a variety of opportunities for their active engagement on campus. Each year, an award committee reviews scores of nominees, and it is challenged to select from among many worthy candidates those it feels merit this award. It is a daunting task, as you can surely imagine. For each of the award recipients, the Phillips Academy and Abbott Academy experience was a beginning for them. Each of the 4 awardees being recognized today has much more to say about their personal journeys than time would allow in this all-school meeting. So therefore, I encourage you to take advantage of their time on campus, to meet them, talk about their activities and interests, and about your own aspirations. They will be in the mural room in Peresky's Commons after this meeting, and you're, of course, welcome to come by to greet them, whether or not you encounter them in some other setting, as there are many other settings while they're on campus. The Award of Distinction Committee is delighted that the 2018 recipients will be introduced and formally presented with their awards by students. I therefore happily turn the program over to them.
Hi, I'm Chermayeff, and I'm in the class of 21. Today I am honored to introduce my great uncle, Peter Chermayeff, who is in the class of 1953. After graduating from Andover, he then earned an AB degree from Harvard and a master's degree in architecture from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Peter is a renowned architect who began his work in 1962 when he and his team took charge of the site planning, urban design, and the architecture of the New England Aquarium located in Boston. During this project, him and his colleagues founded the Cambridge 7 Associates, which undertook many realms of design, such as urban transportation, retail, public exhibitions, museums, offices, hotels, housing, and a diverse mixed use of development. The Cambridge 7 Associates received many awards, including the AIA, the American Institute of Architects Firm of the Year Award in 1993. While covering a wide spectrum in architecture, Peter was drawn to the design of aquariums. He uses long-lasting urban, social, and economic synergies to create institutions that revitalize city realms and promote environmental awareness and conservation. Since 1990, he has been president of IDEA, a firm that manages aquarium development and operations. And since 2009, Peter's been a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, and he continues to serve as the president of his own company. Peter is a hardworking, dedicated, and busy man, but he never fails to make time for his family. He lives with his wife, Andrea, in Andover, and he has 2 children and 4 grandchildren. It's with great pleasure to present the 2018 Alumni Award of Distinction to Peter Chermayeff, Phillips Academy Class of 1953, for his contributions as an architect, urban designer, and innovator.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Subi. I'm stunned. Thank you, Sue, for that wonderful introduction. This award is a great honor and a delight. for me to receive. 69 years ago, in 1949, I arrived at this school as a junior. I was a 13-year-old with eyes wide open. I was quite uncertain about what was in store for me in this bastion of high expectations. It did help my transition that two proctors living a few rooms away in my dorm, Will Hall, were welcoming and fun, and as new to this place as I was. Diz and Audrey Bensley were ready for an adventure with teaching, focused on the visual arts. I found my way gradually, not so much focused on the visual arts while I was here, but turned on by exposure to smart and energizing people all around me. I was an outlier because I was small. I didn't grow. My voice didn't change. I got teased a lot. I was embarrassed in the shower. And I learned to cope with the taunts and to laugh them off. I was only 5'4" when I graduated, but I arrived at Harvard in 1953 ready to grow and much better prepared than I knew at the time. Looking back, I thank PA for encouraging me to try things out, like my hero Richard Feynman, the fun of trying things out. When I got to college, to experiment and to fail, to make a mess of it, but keep going, until the next thing worked. During my time in graduate school, I came back here to experiment with slide tapes with Diz Bensley, combining, as he was doing, visual material with didactic text to address complex subjects. And I found then that the idea of making documentary films was much more interesting to me than the field of architecture I had chosen to train for. I'm going to take you on a rapid trip through some slides. And my first slide is a pair of jellies because they symbolize for me the wonder of nature that I developed as a kid on Cape Cod and which led me to change course from filmmaking back to architecture. I joined with a group of graphic designers, industrial designers, and architects in 1962, right after getting out of graduate school in architecture, to create a multidisciplinary design firm to take on such things as inventing a museum of life. We responded to an amazing opportunity to design a new aquarium for the downtown waterfront in Boston. This is an early cross-section through it. It's an architectural framework for a kind of magic to be made in the dark, exposing people to an emotionally affecting experience of life in the water along an orchestrated, three-dimensional, one-way route. We were able to make an appealing public place and to have a positive impact on the city. We were lucky. And in Boston, we began a lifetime of making major aquariums around the world. And in those early years, we received a second terrific commission. We were a young group, brand new in the field of design, but we were asked to design the exhibits and the interior of the United States exhibition for for Expo 67 in Montreal. And we developed a composition of open platforms within a giant Bucky Fuller bubble. And we chose to represent America as a creative country with a light touch. We had exhibits that included the space program, you see it there on the left, going to the moon, and the new wave of popular art. We also included Hollywood films and Raggedy Ann dolls and mousetraps, inventions that were reflective of creative America. And it was like our aquarium, our first aquarium in Boston, developed with a one-way route. The difference was that it was flooded with daylight instead of being dark and mysterious. And then another amazing opportunity came our way in those early years. We were asked to take on the environmental redesign of Boston's transit system, the MBTA. We studied the whole system. We developed a new visual clarity, out of chaos, a kind of clarity, to know where you were and where you were going. And we gave the system and the rapid transit lines new names as a starting point. We color-coded the lines, and we prepared guidelines for the environmental redesign of countless stations and for the organizing of new stations, new work. It was exciting because we were finding ways to positively impact the lives of huge numbers of people every day. And I would like to mention in these brief remarks a smaller project that opened in 1975 at the Prudential Center. It was Boston's celebration of the U.S. bicentennial, and we chose to make it a portrait of the city, the modern city of Boston. We called it Where's Boston? And the building was quite simple. It was an air-supported vault in red, white, and blue, and on the outside it had a portrait gallery of Bostonians, black and white photographs. In the lobby inside, we placed an exhibit of Boston artifacts, inventions of Boston, and you might say artifacts of all kinds that reflected the city. And we also developed a wall of Boston language, localisms, that mural in the background designed by my brother. Only in Boston is to play Mickey the Dunce another way to be dumb, as an example of that wonderful language of Boston. The show itself was 50 minutes in length, with thousands of slides on 8 screens, and with quadraphonic sound. It was done with interview material, very real, and letting the people speak for themselves. We ran it for 13 years, and I'm pleased to be able to say that my experience here, culminating with making slide tapes with Diz Bensley, was for me the important nursery for the ideas involved. Most of my decades of work with an expanding team of colleagues, brilliant people from countless disciplines, have focused on developing aquariums around the world. I show this one image from many as a symbol of the whole group. This photograph was taken in Lisbon, Portugal, where the Oceanarium opened in 1998, and where I am working with my colleagues on an expansion of that project even today. But I would like to end these brief remarks with a failed project, one that did not happen. It was inspired by the biologist E.O. Wilson and others at Harvard. We proposed a way to take people into another realm of biological diversity, the tropical rainforest, and to do this within a giant terrarium. under glass in the foreground of this master plan study model is the core attraction of a mixed-use urban complex, a total neighborhood, for the waterfront of Osaka in Japan. The proposed enclosure became a bubble, like the one we did in Montreal, but this time it would contain artificial trees with a living canopy of vines and myriad other plants and glass elevators that would take visitors up 100 feet above the forest floor. In the plan view you see here, there's a pathway among the trees. Unlike Expo 67, the outer structure, the envelope of the bubble, is not visible because it's blocked by the dense jungle. This rendering from high up gives an idea of the visitors being immersed in an amazing place surrounded by countless diverse animals found in the canopy. As an example, these leaf cutters would be among countless illustrative close encounters. I must tell you that it has been hugely disappointing not to have been able to build this. Among other things, the Japanese economy collapsed at that moment. But I am convinced that this idea's time will come. Others will do it if I don't. It's the right thing to do. And I'm going to close by saying that many might say that stubborn tenacity in pursuit of an idea like this is crazy when the results are so likely to be disappointing. But I would posit that the pursuit of an idea or of a project of this kind is everything. And I thank PA for being a nurturing place, for being an early builder of confidence that if increments of intense effort fail, that can be just fine. If you are going with your team of wonderfully dedicated people after something of value. And as Fred Astaire sang, one can pick oneself up and start all over again. Thank you very much. This has been a great honor.
Good morning, my name is Grace, and I'm an upper from Los Angeles. An exemplary role model of what it means to pursue one's passions, Eileen Christelow, Abbott Academy class of 1961, is an award-winning author and illustrator of several children's picture books. Many of her works, including Five Little Monkeys and the Henry Rabbit series, have been awarded IRA/CBC Children's Choice Awards and selected for the Junior Library Guild. Christelow's popular titles also include a series of stories inspired by her beloved dog, Emma, whose memories are immortalized in Letters from a Desperate Dog and The Desperate Dog Writes Again. In addition to writing the nonfiction works, What Do Authors Do, What Do Illustrators Do, and Vote, she has published other stories inspired by true events, such as The Five-Dog Night and The Great Pig Escape. Born in Washington, D.C., and raised in Connecticut, books played a central role in Christelow's childhood from the beginning. Constantly surrounded by a love of books and reading, her parents read to her and her brother every night, and they gifted them stories for holidays and birthdays. Cherishing each story, Christelow distinctly remembers spending much of her youth devouring a book from the comfort of an armchair or in a treehouse. Her love of writing truly began, though, in her English classes at Abbott Academy with Mrs. Barbara Sisson. After graduating from Abbott Academy, Christelow continued on to graduate from the University of Pennsylvania with a BA degree. At the university, she studied architecture and learned the basic principles of design that would inform her later work in photography and in illustration. Early on, she developed her career as a freelance photographer and in Berkeley, California, and in Philadelphia, where she photographed architecture, inner-city street life, schools, and the political demonstrations of the 1960s. Following her time as a freelance photographer, Christelow began her endeavors as an author and illustrator in the 1970s, working on book ideas and sending numerous proposals to publishers. Her first book, Henry and the Red Stripes, was published in 1982 after being bought by Jim Giblin at Clarion Books. Giblin continued as Christelow's editor throughout her illustrious career as an author, with more than 30 subsequently published books. Christelow and her husband have one daughter, and in 1981 they moved to Dummerston, Vermont. Whether it's hearing tales told by family members or reading numerous books as a young child, stories play a vital role in all of our childhoods. As Christelow herself can attest, reading is an incredibly important stage in developing curiosity and beginning the journey of education. Christelow has spent her life not only pursuing the things she is most passionate about, but also bringing this joy and education to a myriad of young children. It is with great pleasure to present the 2018 Alumni Award of Distinction to Eileen Christelow, Abbott Academy Class of 1961, for her contributions as an author, illustrator, and photographer.
Well, thank you. I am so honored and so completely surprised because I was this kind of shy kid who I don't think many of my teachers would think I'd be standing up here. But as I was telling this story, I almost didn't come to Abbott. I came from a town, New Canaan, Connecticut, where a lot of people applied to Abbott. And so I guess I applied the beginning of my 9th grade year or something for 10th grade. In the meantime, my family moved to Tokyo, Japan. And so sort of midway through 9th grade in Japan, we got a letter addressed to Eileen Christelow in New Canaan, Connecticut, which was forwarded to Tokyo. Said, "We're sorry to tell you, you are not accepted to Abbott." I thought, oh, well, that's okay. And I, adjusted to the idea I'll go to the New Canaan High School when we get back to the States, and it was fine with me, because I was sort of shy and I wasn't so sure I wanted to go away from home. But then, maybe a month later, there was a letter that was addressed to Eileen Christelow, Tokyo, Japan, saying, "We're so happy to tell you you are accepted to Abbott Academy." So this was a real dilemma, because I was all adjusted to the idea that I was not going to go to Abbott, that I'd go to the high school. And so I'm really good at waffling and dithering and can't make up my mind. And so I finally decided, okay, I don't think I'm going to go. Somehow my dad was in charge of sending the letter back to Abbott that would say I was not coming. Somehow that letter was never sent. I have not to this day figured out exactly whether this was something my parents cooked up or whether it was just completely, I have no idea what happened. Anyhow, my mother, brother, and I were traveling back to the US via Hong Kong, Geneva, a few other places in Europe. And by the time we got to Geneva, there was a telegram waiting saying, "Oops, somehow we never sent the letter back to Abbott and saying she's not coming. They think she's coming. I think she better go. So I was floored. 3 weeks later, literally, I was an Abbott student. And I hated it. For 1 week. And then they piled us all on a bus and took us to, I think it was Revere Beach. And we spent the day on the beach. And I forgot to be unhappy. And I just had a great time. And I came back and I thought, oh God, I've got to be unhappy again. And I thought, no, maybe I don't, maybe this isn't so bad. And so I decided, all right, let's get with the program. You're an Abbott student. You are not going to convince your family that you can go home and just enjoy it. So I did. And Abbott was a very different place from, I look at, I hear about the classes you're taking. I went to an art class today. I saw an architecture class going. This is a very different world from Abbott in the late 50s. We had maybe 3 buildings, far fewer students, and we had a very traditional math, science, language, etc. education. But it was a good education. We were expected to really work hard, which we did. I think that it was a little odd to be just women, girls, with this campus up the hill filled with boys who we never met, except one day each year. There was a dance. And they would line us up, and you were paired according to height. So if you didn't meet the guy of your dreams who happened to be the same height, too bad. And so I never met the guy of my dreams. And we had to, if we went into Andover, we had to go with 2 other girls. We had to sign out, and we had to sign in. I don't know if that happens here. I doubt it. And going into Boston was something you just did not do until I think we were juniors. I can't remember what we were called, something else. And finally, when we did go, we were not supposed to go to the Harvard campus or see any men. You just go to museums or something. But I had a friend whose brother was at Harvard, so of course we went. We didn't have to tell anyone. But we could not wear pants except on Saturdays. And we had to dress up for dinner, which meant wearing stockings. And the stockings had to have seams up the back. And so they didn't say anything about your stockings cannot have runs in them. And so we all cultivated runs, and we had these rags around our legs. They still had the seam, but that was our rebellion of 19. Then the 60s came, and we really learned how to rebel, but so. So anyhow, thanks to Barbara Sisson, who was my English teacher, who I really she was wonderful. And I think part of the reason she was wonderful was, I mean, aside from being an interesting person, was she was also taking graduate courses at Wellesley. And I think she brought some of what she was learning at Wellesley into our classroom. And it was quite a different attitude in ways from some of the other classes we had. And she wrote me a very nice recommendation, even called up Penn, so I got into Penn. And Penn was a really good place to go. It was in the city, and there were lots of possibilities, although they did not, here I was, somebody who loved to draw and think about design, and there was nothing for undergraduates at that time. I think there is now. And the English department wasn't close to what I had had at Abbott, at least the undergraduate first required classes. I'm sure the rest were just fine. So I started looking around, and I discovered that there was a life drawing class. I talked my way into it. It was basically for graduate students, but I talked my way into it. I did that. It was right next to the architecture studio. I started looking and seeing what they were doing there. It looked really interesting. So I talked my way into some courses. I was able to, they said, well, maybe you could major in architecture, but it wasn't like going to graduate school in architecture. So I did manage to find some design classes. So it was just a matter, and I think all of life is like this. You see something that is sort of interests you, and you ask the question, how can I do that? How is it that that person does it? What do I have to do? Keep asking the questions. And so I just I did the architecture classes, I graduated, got into architecture graduate school, but then decided maybe what I wanted to do was not, I wasn't certain I wanted to be an architect. So take some time off. I had a camera, and I used that camera. I was able to use a darkroom at Penn, even though I'd graduated. And I started taking pictures of everything around me. And Philadelphia was a really vital town. This was the 60s. There were the civil rights movement, anti-war movement. And so I just took pictures. I started calling up magazines, taking my photos in. Just anybody who would pay me some money for my photos, that was great. I just kept taking them. And I began to realize, or I realized in retrospect, I was beginning to tell stories with pictures. And my husband and I lived in a neighborhood. We had a big empty factory loft with a jeweler's safe in it. Carnival hats were made in the floor below us. I used the jeweler's safe as a darkroom, and I started taking pictures of all the neighborhood kids. And I started thinking I'd like to do a book with these photos of these kids. And it just couldn't figure out how to make it work as a picture book. And then I started drawing. I thought, okay, I'll draw a story about these kids. And I did a story about a little boy who goes to the market for his mom to buy some soap. He's got $1 or something. But he sees this other kid with a shopping cart full of puppies, and he buys a puppy. But then he has to figure out, so how do I get the $1 back and go buy soap for mom and come home with the puppy? And this was based on me because I had run into some kids with a shopping cart full of puppies and bought a puppy, and it turned out to be the puppy from hell. And It's a bad idea, but sparked a story. So there's always things that are there that create stories that I can draw, that I can photograph. And eventually, I learned how to make a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. How to create illustrations to go with the story. How to make the illustrations move from the beginning to the middle and the end. How to make the illustrations make you want to turn the pages. And it's been a wonderful time. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm from Bangkok, Thailand. I'm in the class of 19. Tamar Szabó Gendler is Yale's inaugural Dean of Faculty of the Arts and Sciences and the Vincent J. Scully Professor of Philosophy and Professor of Psychology and Cognitive Science. She earned a BA degree summa cum laude with a distinction in humanities in mathematics and philosophy from Yale University in 1987, and a PhD degree in philosophy from Harvard University in 1996. After teaching at Syracuse and Cornell universities for nearly a decade, she returned to Yale in 2006 as a professor of philosophy and chair of the Cognitive Science Department. Supported by the Mellon Foundation's New Directions program, Gendler became a full-time student at Yale during the 2009-2010 academic year, completing coursework in psychology, neuroscience, and statistics. In 2010, she was appointed the first woman chair of Yale's philosophy department in its two-century history. In 2013, she was appointed Deputy Provost for Humanities and Initiatives, a position she held until she assumed her current role. Gendler's research brings together the techniques of traditional Anglo-American philosophy with empirical work from psychology and other social sciences. Her interests include the relation between imagination and belief, the contrast between rational and non-rational persuasion, and the role of habits in shaping behavior and judgment. Many of these issues are explored in her open Yale course titled Philosophy and the Science of Human Nature. As Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and previously as Deputy Provost for Humanities and Initiatives, Gendler has focused on opportunities for collaboration and dialogue across traditional disciplinary boundaries within and across the divisions in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and across the university more broadly. She also has interests in education policy and practice. For several years after graduating from Yale, she worked as an education policy analyst at the Rand Corporation. Gendler has had fellowships from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Fellowship Program in the Humanities, Mellon New Directions Program, National Science Foundation, American Council of Learned Societies, Reiskamp Fellowship Program, and the Collegium Budapest Institute for Advanced Studies. In 2013, she was awarded Yale College's Sidonie Miskimen Class of 75 Prize for Teaching Excellence in Humanities. It is my pleasure to present the 2018 Andover Alumni Award of Distinction to Tamar Szabó Gendler, Phillips Academy Class of 1983, for her contribution as a Dean, Professor, and Researcher.
It's an incredible honor for me to be here. I love school, and I love this school. And in this school, I love this building in a particular way, which I want to share with you. This is not only a building where I, as a 13-year-old in 1979, came to take classes. This is a building where I spent many hours playing in this room as a child, because my father, Rabbi Everett Gendler, who is 90, who is here with us today in the front row, had his office on the second floor of this building. And inspired by him and those around him who were his colleagues in those days, that is, the individual who were my teachers, I had the privilege of becoming a teacher. And I have spent my life as a teacher. Right now, I have the pleasure of serving as a teacher at Yale. And one of the ways in which I serve as a teacher is that I am among the faculty who teach together in something that we call the Directed Studies program. The Directed Studies program is a community where we read together a number of the great philosophical and literary and historical works of the Western tradition to think about what they tell us about the constancies and inconstancies of human nature. And around this time of year, one of the books that we read is Homer's Odyssey. It's one of the two great founding poems of the Western tradition that describe in the long work the Iliad, the war at Troy, and in the Odyssey, the journey home of a particular individual from Troy to Ithaca. Like every great work of literature, the Odyssey is rich and it's complicated and it's multifaceted and it's full of the complexities of the human experience. But on this day, at this gathering, which is about the relation between students who are here and now and present, and alumni who have used this place as a locus from which they began a journey, I want to focus on one particular theme from the Odyssey. And that's the theme that the Odyssey asks us, or tells us, or illustrates to us through narrative, that we should treat every moment as if it were simultaneously a step along a path to your destination, and as if it were the destination itself. So let's take this moment, right now. Your students, you're in the middle of Ultimate Week. Everything that you're reviewing so that you can demonstrate mastery of it, so that you can take the next class, so that you can learn the next subject and use that knowledge in the service of some larger goal or career or idea. And if you didn't keep that destination in mind, many of the things that you have to do moment to moment, many of the things that you have to do day to day would not make sense. As local decisions, they aren't ways of optimizing your goal, but as steps along a path, they are. But at the same time, in each moment, as you do each of these steps along a path to a destination, you are also right here. It is right now. You are in this space. You are wholly present. This is both where you are and a step on the path where you're going. So let's think about that in the context of the Odyssey. And I want to read to you the opening lines of the poem as translated by a person named Emily Wilson, who's the first woman whose translation of the Odyssey was circulated to the world. And her translation was published a year ago today. So the story begins in her translation. Tell me about a complicated man, Muse. Tell me how he wandered and was lost, where he went, who he met, the pain that he suffered in the storms at sea. I wish this were a seminar. I wish we could spend the next hours discussing those lines together. A complicated man, where he went, who he met, how this illustrates that the journey and the destination are both different and the same. But I want to use it instead to introduce you to a second poem by the contemporary Greek poet Konstantin Kavafi. And here the translation that I will read you comes from a translator named Edmund Keeley. An aside, why do I mention the translators? I mention the translators to remind you that the cultural heritage of which you are the inheritors is the product not only of those whose names are formally attached to the objects of veneration, but also to those whose hidden labor shapes those objects so that they can be held by those other than the one who created them. So with recognition both of the gifts of the poet, the gifts of the translator, the gifts of those who preserved and transmitted that translation, let me read you the opening lines of the poem. As you set out for Ithaca, writes Kavafi, hope that your road is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. May there be summer mornings when with what pleasure, with what joy you enter harbors you're seeing for the first time. May you stop at Phoenician trading stations to buy fine things, mother of pearl and coral, amber and ebony. The poem goes on to celebrate the value of the journey and closes by reminding us to keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you're destined for, but don't hurry the journey at all. Better if it lasts for years, so that you are old by the time you reach the island, wealthy with all that you've gained along the way. Treat every moment, says that poem, says the poem that inspired it, says the teachers who teach you here, says this gathering of students from the past and students from the present. Treat every moment as if it were simultaneously a step along the path to your destination and at the same time, your destination itself. Think of this as you leave this room, when you walk along the paths of this glorious campus. They are taking you somewhere. At every moment on the journey, do not lose sight of the fact that there is somewhere else that you want to go. But at each moment along the path, notice the beauty of where you are. This is the moment. You are here. This is now. Thank you.
Finis origine pendit. The end depends upon the beginning. That's our message today to all of you. And of course, we take this moment to be grateful to the alumni of our school, including those who have run this award and represented by Mr. Agist on the stage to bring these alumni and alumnae, to bring them up and hold them up as lives well led. And to Peter and Eileen and Tamar, thank you for the extraordinary examples of the lives you have led, of the work that you have done. Thank you for spending time with our students today and yesterday and hopefully in the future. Eileen, next time if you bring up parietals, give me a warning. This group has lots of views about how often we let students of different genders get together, and it is more frequently than in your day. But we welcome you back anytime. This is a big topic on campus, a little cranky. But in each of your cases, You have done such extraordinary things that give inspiration to these students. And I'm struck by two things that joined your remarks. One, the power of narrative. Each of you talked about the power of narrative and the way in which your work has led to wayfinding for other people is a wonderful thing for us to think about. And of course, you tie that back to the beginnings that we're here, so thank you for that. In terms of wayfinding and what comes next, we have a few final notes. One is our guests will be in the mural room, so I hope if you have 7th period free, you will join them, perhaps after that. Second, Mr. Capano wishes me to remind you that it's Andover Exeter weekend this weekend, if anyone had forgotten. Yes, it is. And Andover Exeter gear may be found in the bottom floor of Presky in the Student Activities Office. And last of all, the amazing Blue Key Heads have dressed up in 1980s disco, which is a little bit of cognitive dissonance for me. I think of the disco era as the 70s and different things in the 80s, but in any event, it's awesome, and you're looking good. Will you guys just stand up for a second, give a little disco preview? There they are, Spirit Week. If anybody wants to have your photograph taken on the steps outside here, if you have your disco gear going, but I really hope that tomorrow for Exeter Geek Day, we see more red than we see disco gear, and on Friday, we see more blue. I wish you a wonderful week. All school meeting is dismissed. Thank you.